At 2:07 on a Tuesday morning, my phone lit up with a message that destroyed 23 years of marriage in less than 15 words. It wasn't from a stranger. It wasn't from a scammer. It was from my husband. "I ran away with your best friend. We're never coming back." There was a photo attached. The two of them stood barefoot on a beach in Cancun, champagne glasses raised toward the camera, as if they had just won the lottery. My husband smiled wider than I had seen him smile in years. My best friend leaned against him wearing the necklace I had given her for her 45th birthday. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I replied with only 2 words, "Good luck?" Then I canceled every card, changed every lock, and quietly went to bed. The next morning, the first people knocking on my front door weren't my husband or my former best friend. They were the police. My name is Olivia Bennett. I'm 45 years old, and until that Tuesday, I believed I understood exactly what my life looked like. I worked as a senior accountant for a regional logistics company outside Columbus, Ohio. My days revolved around spreadsheets, quarterly reports, and helping small business owners untangle financial disasters. Numbers rarely lied. People did. Ironically, I had forgotten that last lesson inside my own home. Our brick house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees that turned brilliant shades of orange every autumn. Children rode bicycles in the evenings. Neighbors waved while walking their dogs. It wasn't a wealthy neighborhood, but it was peaceful, and every mortgage payment had been made on time because I insisted on planning our finances carefully. The house was legally mine. Most people didn't know that. When Ethan and I married 23 years earlier, my grandmother had helped me buy the property before the wedding. Later, Ethan moved in after we married. We renovated together. We built memories together. But legally, the deed never changed. Neither did the investment accounts my father had left me after his passing. Those decisions had never mattered before, until they mattered more than anything. Ethan Bennett was 48, charming when he wanted to be, funny enough to make a room like him, and persuasive enough to convince people that every setback was temporary. He owned a small construction company that had done well for years before projects started drying up. Whenever money became tight, I covered the difference. I told myself that was what marriage meant. You carried each other. At least that's what I believed. Rachel Brooks had been my closest friend since college. We survived terrible apartments together, impossible professors, broken hearts, weddings, miscarriages, promotions, funerals, birthdays, and every ordinary Tuesday in between. She knew every secret I'd ever trusted another human being with. When Ethan forgot our anniversary, Rachel reminded him. When I was overwhelmed at work, Rachel brought dinner. When my mother died, Rachel stayed in my guest room for nearly a week. She wasn't just family. She felt safer than family. Which explained why the photograph from Cancun hurt more than I thought anything ever could. I stared at the image for nearly a minute after replying. Not because I hoped it wasn't real, because I noticed details. The hotel bracelet around Ethan's wrist, the expensive sunglasses Rachel wore, the ocean behind them, the champagne. None of it had been paid for with their money. It couldn't have been. I knew exactly how much remained in Ethan's business account. I knew exactly which credit cards they carried. I also knew which cards were connected to my accounts. That realization settled over me like cold rain. I opened my banking app. 3 supplementary credit cards appeared beneath my primary account. Mine. Ethan's. Rachel's emergency card. Years earlier, Rachel had borrowed one during an overseas trip after her wallet had been stolen. She'd eventually returned it, but I'd forgotten to remove her authorization because she never used it again. Or so I thought. I opened the transaction history. Hotel Riviera Cancun, luxury resort dining, private yacht charter, designer boutique, spa, thousands of dollars, charge after charge after charge. My pulse never sped up. Instead, it slowed. That frightened me more than panic would have. Because when I became completely calm, I usually made permanent decisions. I called the credit card company. "Good evening," the representative answered cheerfully. "I need to cancel every supplementary card immediately." "May I ask why?" "Because the authorized users no longer have my authorization." She processed the request in less than 5 minutes. Every card became useless. Next came online banking. Passwords, security questions, 2-factor authentication, wire transfer permissions. I changed everything. Then I searched for a 24-hour locksmith. The dispatcher sounded surprised. "You need every lock changed tonight. Every single one." An hour later, a gray pickup truck pulled into my driveway. The locksmith was probably 60 with tired eyes and rough hands. He looked at the house, then at me. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "No," I answered honestly. "But it will be." He never asked another question. For nearly 2 hours, the sound of drills echoed through my quiet neighborhood. Front door, garage entry, back patio, basement entrance. Every old lock disappeared into a bucket beside his truck. Every new key landed in my palm. When he finished, he handed me 3 copies. "You want extras?" "No." "You sure?" "I don't think I'll be trusting many people after tonight." He nodded with the kind of understanding that comes only from someone who has seen too many marriages end. After he drove away, I walked through the silent house. Nothing looked different. The photographs remained on the walls. Ethan's reading chair still sat beside the fireplace. Rachel's favorite coffee mug was still in my kitchen cabinet because she'd practically lived here during football season. Yet the house felt different, lighter, as if it finally belonged to the person whose name had always been on the paperwork. I slept nearly 6 uninterrupted hours. That surprised me. I expected nightmares. Instead, exhaustion won. At exactly 7:18 Wednesday morning, violent pounding rattled the front door. Not knocking, pounding. 3 heavy blows, then another. I slipped on my robe and walked calmly toward the entrance. For one brief second, I assumed Ethan had discovered his cards no longer worked. Maybe he'd come home angry. Maybe he'd come begging. Maybe both. I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers stood on my porch. One older, one younger. Neither looked angry, but both looked serious. I unlocked the new deadbolt, leaving the security chain in place. The older officer removed his hat. "Good morning, ma'am." "Good morning. Are you Olivia Bennett?" "Yes." He exchanged a glance with his partner before speaking again. "Mrs. Bennett, we've received a complaint from your husband." He paused. "And we need to ask you a few questions." The older officer waited patiently while I removed the security chain and opened the door the rest of the way. "I'm Officer Daniels," he said, extending a hand. "This is Officer Ruiz." I shook both hands. "Would you like to come in?" "We would appreciate that." Their eyes briefly swept across the entryway. They noticed the fresh deadbolt, the clean hallway, and probably the faint smell of sawdust left behind by the locksmith. Neither commented. I led them into the living room where morning sunlight spilled through the bay window onto hardwood floors. Ethan and I had refinished together almost 15 years earlier. For a fleeting moment, I remembered him laughing as he accidentally splashed stain across his jeans. The memory disappeared as quickly as it came. Officer Daniels remained standing. "I'm afraid your husband contacted local authorities early this morning. He claims you've locked him out of the marital residence, frozen his access to family finances, and illegally taken control of jointly owned assets." His tone wasn't accusatory. It was procedural. I folded my hands calmly. "I see." Officer Ruiz studied my face. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." Officer Daniels continued. "Mr. Bennett says he attempted to purchase airline tickets home this morning, but every credit card was declined. He also claims you emptied the accounts." "I didn't empty anything." "So you did cancel the cards?" "Yes." Officer Daniels gave a slow nod. "Can you explain why?" Instead of answering immediately, I walked into my home office. I'd always believed important conversations deserved documents, not emotions. Inside a gray filing cabinet sat neatly labeled folders, arranged alphabetically. Home, insurance, retirement, property, banking. I returned carrying 3 folders and placed them carefully on the dining room table. Officer Ruiz exchanged another glance with his partner. "I thought you might ask questions," I said. Officer Daniels opened the first folder. "The property deed." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "This house belongs to me." He read the date. "Purchased 6 months before your marriage." "Correct. And Mr. Bennett was never added to the title." "No." Officer Ruiz quietly read over his shoulder. Neither officer said anything for several seconds. Officer Daniels closed the folder. "Mr. Bennett described this as our house. It was our home." I chose my words carefully. Legally, those aren't always the same thing. The second folder contained investment records, retirement accounts, and beneficiary documents. Everything predated my marriage. Everything remained in my name. Officer Ruiz finally spoke. "So these accounts also belong to you?" "They're not joint accounts." "No." "What about the credit cards?" "They're attached to my accounts." Ethan had an authorized user card. Officer Daniels leaned back slightly. "So canceling them was my legal right?" He nodded once. "I believe it was." Silence settled across the room. Outside, someone pushed a stroller along the sidewalk. A lawnmower started somewhere down the block. Ordinary Wednesday morning sounds. Inside my dining room, 23 years of marriage were quietly being reduced to paperwork. Officer Daniels closed the final folder. "Mrs. Bennett, may I ask what happened?" I reached for my phone. Without saying a word, I opened the message Ethan had sent 8 hours earlier. Then I handed it across the table. Officer Daniels adjusted his reading glasses. Officer Ruiz leaned closer. Neither officer spoke while they read. The photograph lingered on the screen. Ethan, Rachel, Champagne, Cancun. Finally, Officer Ruiz exhaled softly. "So," he looked almost embarrassed. "They actually sent you this at 2 o'clock this morning." Officer Daniels returned the phone. "I understand why you changed the locks." I offered a small smile. "I thought you might." He hesitated. "Mr. Bennett neglected to mention this part." "I'm sure he did." The older officer looked around the room again. "Did he ever threaten you?" "No." "Did he ever become violent?" "No." "Then why change every lock instead of just asking him not to come home?" I looked toward the front door. "Because he already told me he wasn't coming home." Officer Daniels nodded slowly. "Fair point." Officer Ruiz shifted in his chair. "What about the money he insists you drained the accounts?" "I transferred nothing from any account that belonged to him." "You only removed access?" "Exactly." "Would you mind showing us?" I logged into my online banking account. The screen filled with balances. "Transactions. Authorized users." Officer Ruiz watched quietly. Everything was still there. Nothing had disappeared. Officer Daniels pointed toward the transaction history. "Would you scroll back?" I did. Hotel charges, restaurants, luxury shopping, spa services, boat excursion. Every expense had occurred in Cancun. Every expense had been charged against supplementary cards connected to my primary account. Officer Ruiz frowned. "When did these begin?" I kept scrolling. Monday afternoon. Monday evening. Tuesday morning. Tuesday afternoon. The charges had started before Ethan even sent his dramatic message, as though he'd assumed I'd never notice. Officer Daniels rubbed his chin. "Looks like they were enjoying themselves." "I suppose so." Then something caught my eye. A transfer. $8,000. Unknown recipient. The timestamp showed 3 weeks earlier. I frowned. "That's strange." Officer Daniels looked up. "What is—" "I don't remember authorizing this." I clicked. Another transfer appeared. 6,000. Then another. 4,500. Different dates. Different amounts. Always approved electronically. Always from my account. A cold pressure settled across my chest. "I'm sorry." I leaned closer to the monitor. "I've never seen these." Officer Ruiz stepped beside me. "You didn't make them." "No." My accounting instincts took over immediately. Ignore emotion. Follow numbers. I filtered transactions by electronic transfers. The screen populated with dozens of entries. Some small. Some surprisingly large. None looked familiar. Officer Daniels quietly observed. "How often do you review these?" "Monthly." "And you never noticed?" "I review statements." I clicked another tab. But these were hidden among routine business reimbursements. I opened the recipient details. Several accounts. Different banks. Different names. The total climbed higher with every calculation running through my head. 10,000. 20. 32. Nearly $40,000. Gone. Not overnight. Over almost 11 months, my breathing remained steady. Years of accounting had trained me well. Panic later. Evidence first. Officer Ruiz looked concerned. "Mrs. Bennett, I think my husband has been stealing from me." Neither officer interrupted. I continued opening records, transfer after transfer. Some referenced construction materials. Others consulting fees. Several had no explanation whatsoever. Officer Daniels finally spoke. "You should contact your bank immediately." "I will." "And probably an attorney." "I know one." His expression softened. "For what it's worth, this appears to be much larger than a marital disagreement." "I agree." Officer Daniels closed his notebook. "I'm documenting exactly what we've seen today." Officer Ruiz added quietly. "There doesn't appear to be any criminal issue regarding the locks or the cards." "I didn't think there would be." Officer Daniels stood. "If Mr. Bennett attempts to force entry into this house, call us immediately." "I will." "If anyone threatens you, I'll call." He offered one final look around the room. "I'm sorry your morning started this way." I smiled politely. My morning actually started at 2:07. For the first time, Officer Daniels almost smiled back. After they left, I locked the front door, not because I was afraid, because habits mattered. The house became silent again. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, pulled every financial record from the previous year. By noon, my dining room table had disappeared beneath stacks of statements, tax documents, wire confirmations, and credit card summaries. The deeper I looked, the worse everything became. This wasn't an impulsive affair. This had been planned, funded, carefully hidden, and somehow, I had balanced everyone else's books while failing to notice someone had been quietly rewriting my own life. I reached for my phone. One name came immediately to mind: Lauren Hayes. The best financial litigation attorney I'd ever worked with. She answered on the second ring. Lauren Hayes. It's Olivia Bennett. A brief pause. Olivia, you sound different. I need a lawyer. Another pause. Then her voice became all business. What happened? I stared at the latest unauthorized transfer glowing on my computer screen. My husband ran away with my best friend, and I think he may have committed fraud. There was complete silence. Then Lauren spoke 6 words that changed everything. Don't touch another single document. Lauren Hayes arrived at my house just after 3 that afternoon, carrying nothing more than a leather briefcase and a legal pad. She didn't waste time with sympathy. That was one of the reasons I had called her instead of anyone else. She set her briefcase on my dining room table, now buried beneath bank statements, receipts, tax documents, and handwritten notes. You've already done half my job, she said as she looked over the piles. I've spent 20 years finding accounting errors. She gave me a faint smile. Then today let's find something even more valuable. The truth. The evidence. For the next 3 hours, neither of us talked very much. We worked. Lauren reviewed every unauthorized transfer while I traced each payment back through my bookkeeping software. Whenever we found something unusual, she marked it with a yellow tab. Soon the table looked like a sea of yellow paper. Look at this, she finally said. She slid 3 statements toward me. At first they looked unrelated. One payment had gone to a luxury apartment complex downtown. Another had been wired to a luxury car dealership. The third was labeled only as consulting services. Different dates, different recipients, different amounts. What do they have in common? I asked. Lauren turned the pages around. The receiving bank. I stared for several seconds. Every payment had ended in the same 4 account numbers. So, she nodded. They're all feeding the same account. I felt my stomach tighten. You think Ethan opened another account? I think Ethan opened one he never wanted you to see. We requested additional transaction details through my bank. Because I was the account owner, they agreed to provide everything connected to the outgoing transfers. While we waited, Lauren asked another question. Tell me about Rachel. The name felt strange now, as if it belonged to someone I had never actually known. We met in college. You trusted her. With everything. Did she ever borrow money? No. Did she ever have financial problems? I paused. Not until about a year ago. Lauren looked up. What happened? She lost her marketing job. I remembered comforting Rachel over coffee. She had cried. She worried she would lose her condo. She said she couldn't sleep. I had believed every word. So that's when Ethan started helping her, Lauren asked. I assumed he was just being kind. Lauren wrote something on her legal pad. Or they were already planning this. The sentence hung in the air. I wanted to reject it immediately. Instead, another memory surfaced. Rachel suddenly driving a newer SUV. Designer handbags she joked she'd found on sale. Weekend trips she could somehow afford despite being unemployed. I had accepted every explanation because I trusted the person giving it. Trust I realized had been my blind spot. My phone buzzed. The bank. The representative emailed the expanded transfer records while staying on the line. I opened the file. Lauren moved beside me. There it was. Every outgoing transfer. Every destination account. Every authorization code. And something neither of us expected. Lauren leaned closer. Olivia. I see it. The authorization wasn't mine. The system showed electronic signatures. But the IP address attached to each approval originated from Ethan's office. Not our home. His office. I clicked another record. Same thing. Another. Same result. Lauren slowly closed the laptop. This just became much more serious. You think he forged my authorization? I think he intentionally created the appearance that you approved transfers you never saw. I looked across the room toward the family photographs still sitting on the bookshelf. One picture showed Ethan and me celebrating our 20th anniversary. Another included Rachel standing between us laughing. The 3 of us looked like people who would always trust each other. Appearances I thought could survive long after the truth had disappeared. Lauren broke the silence. There's more. She opened one of the supporting documents. This apartment downtown. What about it? It isn't rented under Ethan's name. I frowned. Rachel. Lauren nodded. The lease belongs to Vanessa Rachel Brooks. My chest tightened. So I've been paying her rent. It appears that way. We continued following the money. Furniture store. Insurance payments. Utility deposits. Even grocery deliveries. Piece by piece, a second life emerged from the paperwork. Not a spontaneous affair. A carefully financed escape, one that had been built with my money. I leaned back in my chair. I kept thinking the affair was the betrayal. Lauren folded her hands. It wasn't. It was the cover. She nodded once. Exactly. As evening settled outside, we ordered takeout. Neither of us touched until it had gone cold. The more we uncovered, the less hungry I became. Near 7 o'clock, another notification arrived. This time from my email account. An automatic security alert. Someone had attempted to log into my cloud storage from Cancun. The attempt had failed because I had changed every password the previous night. Lauren looked at the screen. They're looking for something. My financial files. Or your tax records. Maybe both. I suddenly remembered something else. My digital signature. Lauren looked at me sharply. What about it? Ethan insisted I scan it years ago. He said it would make business paperwork easier whenever I was traveling. Where was it stored? I pointed toward an old external hard drive sitting in my desk drawer. Lauren didn't say a word. She connected it to my laptop. Folders appeared. Taxes. Insurance. Photos. Estate planning. Then another folder. Business. I frowned. I've never opened that one. Inside were dozens of PDF files. Contracts. Loan applications. Vendor agreements. Many carried what looked like my electronic signature, except I had never seen most of them. Lauren read silently for several minutes before speaking. Olivia. Her voice had changed. This isn't just unauthorized spending anymore. I looked at her. What is it? I believe your husband used your signature on financial documents without your knowledge. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Outside rain began tapping softly against the kitchen windows. I closed my eyes for only a moment. Not because I wanted to escape. Because I needed one steady breath before facing whatever came next. When I opened them again, Lauren was already organizing the evidence into separate folders. Fraud. Unauthorized transfers. False authorizations. Possible forged signatures. She looked at me with the calm confidence of someone who had walked into difficult courtrooms for 20 years. Starting now, she said, you do not answer Ethan's calls. I wasn't planning to. You don't answer Rachel either. I won't. If either of them comes here, I call the police. She nodded. And if they apologize, I surprised myself by smiling. They're welcome to apologize. Lauren waited. But they'll do it through their attorneys. She smiled for the first time that day. Good. She packed the files into her briefcase, leaving copies neatly stacked on my dining room table. Before reaching the front door, she stopped. I have one piece of advice. I'm listening. People who think they've gotten away with everything almost always make one final mistake. What kind of mistake? They come back. I watched her drive away through the rain. The house was quiet again. For the first time since receiving Ethan's message from Cancun, I wasn't wondering whether he'd return. I knew he would. He simply had no idea that when he did, I wouldn't be waiting with tears. I'd be waiting with evidence. Lauren's prediction took less than 48 hours to come true. Saturday afternoon was unusually warm for early spring. I was trimming the rose bushes along the front walkway when a taxi slowed to a stop in front of my house. I recognized Ethan before he even stepped out. The confidence he'd worn in the Cancun photograph was gone. His polo shirt was wrinkled, his beard had grown in unevenly, and the expensive sunglasses he had proudly worn on the beach were nowhere to be found. Rachel climbed out after him. She carried 2 oversized suitcases and a designer handbag I had unknowingly paid for. Even from 30 feet away, I could see the tension between them. They weren't speaking. So much for paradise. I quietly set the pruning shears on the porch and walked inside before either of them reached the front steps. 3 firm knocks echoed through the house. Then Ethan's voice. Olivia. I didn't answer. Another knock. Olivia, I know you're home. Only then did I unlock the door, keeping the security latch in place. Ethan forced a smile. There you are. I looked at him calmly. What do you need? His smile disappeared. My cards aren't working. I know. We've been trying to reach you. I know. You changed the locks. Yes. Rachel stepped forward. You've made your point. I looked at her for the first time since Cancun. No, Rachel. I haven't. She folded her arms. We just want to come inside and talk. You told me you were never coming back. Ethan sighed dramatically. We said a lot of things. No, I corrected him. You texted exactly 3 sentences. He rubbed the back of his neck. Can we not do this outside? No. The silence stretched long enough for a neighbor across the street to glance toward us while collecting her mail. Ethan lowered his voice. The hotel froze our reservation. I'm sorry to hear that. Our accounts aren't working. I know. We've been living out of suitcases for 2 days. I know. His patience cracked. Olivia, stop saying you know. I know because I canceled the cards. Rachel took another step. You had no right. I couldn't help smiling. I had every right, she laughed sarcastically. Everything Ethan has belongs to both of you. Actually, I tilted my head slightly. The bank disagrees. Ethan's jaw tightened. We're married. We are, so half of everything is mine. I looked directly into his eyes. Then your attorney should have no trouble proving that. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rachel finally broke the silence. We just need enough money to get back on our feet. I almost laughed. My retirement savings weren't meant to finance your honeymoon. It wasn't a honeymoon. No, you don't understand. I understand exactly what you told me. I reached into the entryway cabinet and removed a large manila envelope Lauren had prepared the previous evening. What is that? Ethan asked. I slid it through the narrow opening in the door. He opened it. His face slowly lost color. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Request for temporary financial injunction. Motion to preserve assets. Lauren had moved fast. Very fast. You already filed? I did. You didn't even talk to me. You announced the end of our marriage from a beach. Rachel glanced over Ethan's shoulder. What does that mean? He swallowed hard. It means... He stopped reading. It means she's freezing everything. I nodded. Every account connected to me. His eyes widened. My business will continue using the accounts legally registered to your company. He stared at me. You knew? I know a great deal more now than I did 3 days ago. A flicker of panic crossed his face. What does that mean? It means Lauren has been very busy. Rachel suddenly looked nervous. Who's Lauren? My attorney. Ethan took one quick step toward the door. You hired a lawyer. I hired the right lawyer. His breathing changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. He realized this wasn't an emotional argument. It was becoming a legal case. Rachel grabbed his arm. Let's just get our things. I nodded toward the garage. They're already packed. Both of them turned. The boxes sat neatly stacked beneath the covered driveway. Every shirt, every pair of shoes, every jacket, every kitchen gadget they'd purchased together. Nothing damaged, nothing thrown away. Simply packed with the same care I'd once used while wrapping Christmas presents. Rachel frowned. You packed all this? I had time. Ethan walked slowly toward the boxes. He picked up one labeled office, another labeled winter clothes, a third read family photos. He opened it. The framed pictures were individually wrapped in newspaper. He looked back at me. You left the pictures. They belong to your memories, too. For the first time since arriving, guilt briefly appeared on his face. It vanished almost immediately. Olivia? His voice softened. We made a mistake. I said nothing. We can fix this. No. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't plan to get caught. His shoulders slumped. Rachel looked irritated. Ethan. He ignored her. I'll end it. I studied him carefully. With Rachel? Yes. Rachel's head snapped toward him. What? He didn't look at her. I'll come home. The words hung in the air, not because they were convincing, because they arrived far too late. I shook my head slowly. You didn't leave because you were confused. You left because you believed I'd always be here. He opened his mouth again. Before another word could leave it, 2 patrol cars turned onto my street. Blue lights flashed silently. Rachel stiffened. Ethan. I know. Officer Daniels stepped out of the first cruiser. Officer Ruiz followed behind him. They both recognized me immediately. Officer Daniels approached calmly. Good afternoon, Mrs. Bennett. Good afternoon. He looked toward Ethan. Mr. Bennett. Ethan forced a smile. I wasn't causing trouble. Officer Daniels remained expressionless. We received a report that someone was attempting to enter a residence after being instructed not to. I wasn't forcing my way in. No? The officer nodded. But you've been asked to leave. Ethan looked at me. You called them? Yes. Officer Ruiz stepped beside the stacked boxes. "Looks like your belongings have already been prepared." Rachel whispered something under her breath. Officer Daniels continued, "Mr. Bennett, unless Mrs. Bennett invites you inside, you need to remain off the property." "We're still married." Officer Daniels nodded. "And this property is currently titled solely in Mrs. Bennett's name." Ethan stared. "How do you know that—" "We've already reviewed the documentation." His face went completely pale. The confidence he had carried into Cancun finally disappeared. Rachel looked back and forth between us. "This is unbelievable." "No," I said quietly. "This is paperwork." Officer Daniels waited while Ethan loaded the final box into the taxi. Before closing the trunk, Ethan turned toward me one last time. "This isn't over." I met his eyes without raising my voice. "I know. But next time—" I glanced briefly toward Officer Daniels. "Bring your attorney." The taxi pulled away without another word. I stood on my porch until it disappeared around the corner. Officer Daniels approached before returning to his cruiser. "Everything okay?" For the first time in days. I took a slow breath. "I think it will be." He nodded. "I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again." "So do I." As the patrol cars drove away, my phone vibrated. A new email. From Lauren. The subject line contained only 5 words. "They've officially responded. Court date scheduled." I opened the attachment. 4 weeks. In exactly 4 weeks, everything Ethan had tried to hide would become part of the public record. The courthouse looked exactly the way I remembered from years earlier when I had testified in a routine business dispute on behalf of my company. Gray stone, metal detectors, quiet conversations, people pretending they weren't nervous. This time I wasn't there as an accountant reviewing someone else's mistakes. I was there because my husband had spent nearly a year stealing from me while convincing the world he was the victim. Lauren met me outside the courtroom carrying 2 organized trial binders. Every document had color-coded tabs. "You look calm," she said. "I am." "Good." She handed me a bottle of water. "Don't volunteer information. Answer only what's asked. Let the documents do the talking." That had become our strategy. Facts over emotion. Evidence over outrage. As we entered the courtroom, Ethan was already seated beside his attorney. He wore a navy suit I had bought for him on our 20th anniversary. Rachel sat 1 row behind him. She avoided looking at me. For the first time since Cancun, she looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. Whatever fantasy they had imagined had clearly collapsed long before today. Ethan looked confident. Too confident. His attorney, Mark Ellison, stood and greeted Lauren with a polite handshake. "Good morning." "Morning, Mark. I hear you've built quite a case." Lauren smiled faintly. "I've simply organized the truth." The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and an expression that discouraged unnecessary speeches. Everyone stood. Then we sat. Mr. Ellison spoke first. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about a marriage that ended badly. My client made poor personal decisions, but Mrs. Bennett reacted by financially destroying him. She froze assets, denied access to marital resources, and acted out of revenge rather than necessity." He spoke smoothly, confidently. If I hadn't lived through the past month, I might have believed him. When he finished, the judge turned toward Lauren. "Ms. Hayes." Lauren stood. "This case is not about a broken marriage." She paused deliberately. "It's about financial deception." She placed the first binder before the judge. "My client did not remove assets from Mr. Bennett." She opened the binder. "She protected assets that legally belonged to her after discovering they had been used without her knowledge." Judge Whitmore nodded. "Proceed." Lauren projected the first exhibit onto the courtroom screen. The Cancun photograph. Then Ethan's text message. "I ran away with your best friend. We're never coming back." No one spoke. Lauren clicked again. Credit card statements appeared. Hotel charges. Restaurants. Luxury shopping. Private excursions. Each charge highlighted. Each connected to my account. She didn't dramatize anything. She simply read dates and amounts. The silence became heavier with every slide. Then came the bank transfers, one after another. Apartment lease payments, vehicle deposits, insurance premiums, furniture purchases. Rachel slowly lowered her head. Lauren continued. "These transfers originated from accounts solely owned by Mrs. Bennett." She displayed the authorization logs. "The approvals appear to bear Mrs. Bennett's electronic signature." Another click. IP addresses. Every authorization originated from Ethan's office. Not my home, not my workplace. His office. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Mr. Ellison. The attorney adjusted his glasses. My client acknowledges making transfers. Lauren interrupted gently. With permission. Ellison hesitated. We maintain there was implied marital consent. Lauren walked to the evidence table. I'd like to call Mr. Bennett. Ethan took the witness stand. He looked composed. Lauren approached slowly. Mr. Bennett, did your wife know about the apartment leased under Ms. Rachel Brooks's name? No. Did she authorize you to pay that lease? No. Did she know you used her account to do so? No. The courtroom remained silent. Lauren didn't raise her voice. Were you having a relationship with Ms. Brooks at that time? Ethan swallowed. Yes. And you used your wife's money to support that relationship? He hesitated. Yes. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. Lauren waited until the room settled. Mr. Bennett, did your wife ever authorize these transfers in writing? No. Verbally? No. Did you tell the bank she had approved them? He looked toward his attorney. Judge Whitmore answered for him. You'll answer the question. Yes. Lauren nodded once. No further questions. The judge turned toward Mr. Ellison. Redirect. He stood but looked noticeably less certain. No questions. Rachel was called next. She walked to the witness stand without looking at me. Lauren spoke kindly. Ms. Brooks, did you know where the money came from? Rachel's fingers tightened around the armrest. At first. She stopped. At first. Ethan said they shared everything. And later, I found out it was Olivia's. When... She closed her eyes briefly. About 3 months before Cancun. Lauren paused. Yet you continued accepting payments, Rachel whispered. Yes. Ethan turned sharply toward her. You said we weren't talking about that. Judge Whitmore immediately intervened. Mr. Bennett, you'll remain silent, Rachel continued. I asked him several times if he was going to tell Olivia, and he kept saying there'd be plenty left, that she'd never notice. For the first time that morning, Ethan looked genuinely frightened. Lauren displayed one final exhibit, the recovered email folder. Inside were contracts containing my electronic signature. Lauren addressed the judge. A forensic document examiner reviewed these files. She handed over the report. The electronic signature was copied from a previously authorized tax document and reused without Mrs. Bennett's knowledge. Judge Whitmore spent several minutes reading. No one spoke. The only sound in the courtroom came from papers turning. Finally, she looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Bennett. He slowly stood. This court was initially asked to resolve a marital property dispute. She placed the report on the bench. What I now see is evidence suggesting possible financial fraud and unauthorized use of another person's identity. The room became perfectly still. Judge Whitmore continued. The civil issues before this court are straightforward. She looked toward me. The residence remains the sole property of Mrs. Bennett. She turned to Ethan. The disputed accounts belong to Mrs. Bennett. Another pause. The unauthorized transfers appear undisputed. She signed several pages. The court orders immediate reimbursement of recoverable marital funds, affirms the temporary financial injunction, and grants Mrs. Bennett exclusive possession of the residence pending final dissolution. Ethan's shoulders dropped, but the judge wasn't finished. She lifted the forensic report once more. This court is referring these additional findings to the appropriate investigative authorities. Mr. Ellison closed his eyes briefly. He knew exactly what that meant. Lauren quietly squeezed my arm beneath the counsel table. Not in celebration, in reassurance. As the hearing concluded, Ethan finally looked at me. For weeks I had imagined that moment. I expected anger, maybe regret. Instead I saw confusion, as though he genuinely couldn't understand how everything had unraveled so completely. The answer had never been complicated. It wasn't Cancun. It wasn't Rachel. It wasn't even the affair. It was the moment he convinced himself that the truth would stay buried forever. As the bailiff announced the hearing adjourned, Lauren gathered our binders. Outside the courtroom, she allowed herself one small smile. The hardest part is over. I looked back through the courtroom doors as Ethan remained seated beside his attorney. No, I said quietly. For him, it's only beginning. 3 months after the hearing, the house felt quieter than it ever had before. Not empty, quiet. There is a difference. Empty is what I felt in those first few days after Ethan left, when I still expected to hear his keys hit the bowl by the front door, or Rachel's laugh drifting in from the kitchen like she still belonged there. Quiet came later after the shock had faded, and the rooms stopped waiting for people who no longer deserved to enter them. By June, I had changed more than the locks. I changed the curtains in the bedroom. I donated the oversized recliner Ethan had claimed as his throne in the living room. I took down every photograph that made me feel like a fool for trusting what had been standing beside me. Then slowly I put up new ones. A picture of my sister and me at Lake Michigan, both of us windblown and laughing. A framed watercolor from a local art fair. A photo of my mother holding me when I was 5. Nothing dramatic. Nothing expensive. Just proof that my life had existed before Ethan Bennett and would continue after him. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday afternoon in a small conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. Ethan sat across from me with his attorney thinner than I remembered, his suit hanging differently on his shoulders. Rachel was not there. She had left him sometime after the fraud referral became real. According to Lauren, she was cooperating with investigators in exchange for her own protection. I didn't ask for details. There are some things you stop wanting to know because knowing them won't give you peace. The final agreement was simple. The house remained mine. My retirement accounts remained mine. Ethan was ordered to repay a substantial portion of what he had taken through the sale of business assets and structured payments monitored by the court. His construction company, already unstable, collapsed under the weight of liens, unpaid vendors, and the investigation. I did not smile when Lauren explained it. I did not celebrate when the judge signed the final decree. I simply breathed. For 23 years I had thought marriage meant carrying the heavy things together. What I had not understood was that Ethan had slowly handed me every burden and called it partnership. After the papers were signed, he followed me into the courthouse hallway. "Olivia." I stopped but did not turn immediately. Lauren remained beside me. Ethan looked at her. "Can I speak to my wife alone?" "Ex-wife," Lauren corrected. The word landed cleanly. Ex-wife. Not wife. Not partner. Not the woman waiting at home while he built a second life with her money. I finally faced him. "You can speak here." His mouth tightened, but he nodded. "I know you hate me." "I don't." That surprised him. Maybe it surprised me too. Hate required a kind of closeness I no longer felt. He looked down at his hands. "I ruined everything." "Yes, I was stupid." "No." I kept my voice calm. "Stupid is forgetting an anniversary. Stupid is buying the wrong paint color. What you did was deliberate." He flinched. For a moment the man in front of me looked less like a villain and more like someone who had finally reached the end of his own excuses. "I don't know how I became that person," he said. I believed him. Not because he was innocent. Because some people destroy their lives one small justification at a time, and only recognize themselves when the damage is too large to hide. "I hope you figure it out," I said. He looked up. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I thought about the Cancun message. Rachel's necklace. The bank transfers. The forged signatures. The police on my porch. The courtroom. Then I thought about the quiet house waiting for me with sunlight falling through new curtains I had chosen myself. "I already stopped letting you live inside my head," I said. "That's all I can offer." His eyes reddened. I didn't stay to watch the tears come. Outside the afternoon was warm and bright. Lauren walked me to my car without speaking. Just before I opened the door, she handed me the final signed copy of the decree. "You're free," she said. I looked at the papers, then at the courthouse steps, then at the sky. "No," I said softly. "I'm safe." That summer I learned how many ordinary things can feel extraordinary when no one is taking pieces of you in secret. I bought peaches at the farmer's market without checking whether Ethan had made another unexplained withdrawal. I slept through the night without waking to review bank alerts. I invited my sister Claire over for dinner and cooked salmon the way Ethan had always claimed he hated. We ate it on the patio with cheap white wine and bare feet propped on the opposite chair. "You seem different," Claire said. "I am different." "Better." I watched a robin hop along the fence. More honest. That was the truest answer I had. I joined a weekend financial literacy program for women rebuilding after divorce. At first, I volunteered only because Lauren suggested it might help someone. Then one Saturday morning, a woman about my age stayed after class with a folder clutched to her chest. "My husband handles everything," she whispered. I knew that whisper. I knew the shame inside it. I pulled out a chair and sat with her for nearly an hour. We didn't fix her whole life that day, but we opened her first bank statement together. Sometimes freedom begins with a password only you know. In August, an envelope arrived from the court confirming Ethan's first repayment had been processed. The amount was smaller than what he owed, but it was real. I placed the check on my desk and stared at it for a long time. Then I deposited it into a new account labeled Garden Fund. By September, the backyard had changed completely. Raised beds, lavender, tomatoes, a small stone path leading to a wooden bench beneath the maple tree. I hired a local carpenter to build the bench, and when he asked what inscription I wanted carved into the back, I thought for several days. In the end, I chose 5 words. She chose herself and stayed. The first time I sat there alone, I cried. Not loudly, not painfully, just enough to honor the woman who had answered a cruel message with 2 calm words, and then saved her own life one decision at a time. Late one evening, as the air cooled and the first leaves began to turn, my phone vibrated on the patio table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I opened the message. It was Ethan. Can we talk? No apology. No explanation. Just another request. Another door he expected me to open because I had opened so many before. I stared at the screen. For a long moment, I remembered being 22 and believing love meant never giving up. Then I thought about being 45 and understanding something far more important. Love without respect becomes a debt you pay forever. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. The sky above my backyard had softened into deep blue. Somewhere nearby, wind moved through the maple leaves. My house glowed behind me, warm and steady, every lock changed, every room reclaimed. Ethan had thought he was leaving me with nothing. He never understood that what he took with him was the life I no longer wanted. And what he left behind was mine. My home, my money, my peace, my name. If this story touched something in you, maybe because you've been betrayed, used, or made to feel guilty for protecting yourself, I want you to remember this: starting over is not failure. Sometimes it is the first honest thing you have done for yourself in years. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and let me know if you've ever had to choose yourself after someone took your kindness for weakness. Your story matters more than you think. And if you want more stories about strength, dignity, and second chances, subscribe and stay with us. We have many more journeys to share, and I would be honored to have you here for the next one.